On a freezing mountain ridge, far from any road or help, a war-scarred veteran followed his K9 into a place no one wanted, a cave everyone called worthless. Inside that darkness, he didn't just find shelter. He found a woman dying from a snake bite and a moment that would force him to choose who he would become after war. With winter closing in and nothing but stone, silence, and instinct to rely on, he made a decision that would change more than just his own life. What happens next will make you believe in quiet miracles and second chances for the forgotten. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe no child or animal should ever face fear alone, hit subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Clearwater Hollow lay tucked between two long ridgelines in western Colorado, a town shaped by cold and patience. Winter came early here, not with the softness of falling snow, but with a dry, punishing chill that stripped warmth from skin and breath alike. In late November, the sky remained locked in a dull gray, and the wind slid down from the high country carrying the smell of stone, resin, and frozen earth. The creek at the edge of town still flowed, but only barely, its dark surface rimmed with ice. People moved with purpose, heads lowered, coats pulled tight, as if lingering too long outdoors invited the season to claim them. Caleb Whitmore arrived just after sunrise when the cold was sharpest. He parked along the narrow main street, the engine ticking as it cooled, and took a moment before stepping out. He was 41 years old. Broad-shouldered and solidly built, his body shaped by years of military training that had taught him efficiency rather than grace. His posture was straight without effort, the kind that never quite relaxed even when standing still. Dark hair, cut short but no longer regulation tight, lay flattened by a knit cap. A rough stubble covered his jaw and upper lip, giving his face a weathered look that made him appear older at a glance. His features were angular, strong nose, square jaw, and his eyes, a muted gray, held a constant alertness. Caleb did not look threatening, but he did look prepared, and people tended to sense the difference. At his side stood Rex. The German Shepherd was 9 years old, past his prime by working dog standards, but still powerful through the chest and hindquarters. His coat was thick and well kept, black along the spine and fading into tan along the legs and neck. One ear bore a small notch, a souvenir from a long-ago incident, and a thin white scar ran through the fur above his right foreleg. Rex's eyes were calm and observant, tracking movement without anxiety. He wore a plain harness with a worn handle on top, no patches or insignia, but his discipline was unmistakable. He did not pull or fidget. He simply stood close to Caleb, close enough to touch if needed. They had not come to Clearwater Hollow by accident. 3 weeks earlier, Caleb had received a letter forwarded from an old address in Colorado Springs. It came from an attorney representing the estate of a distant relative, an uncle by marriage, whom Caleb barely remembered. The man had died without children, leaving behind little of value. Among the paperwork was a deed, 17 acres of land near Clearwater Hollow, classified in county records as rocky terrain with extensive cave formations, unsuitable for farming and of minimal market worth. The attorney's note was brief and practical. If Caleb did not claim the property, it would be sold to cover administrative fees. Caleb had read the letter twice, then folded it and set it aside. For a full day, he told himself it meant nothing. He had spent the years after leaving the military avoiding long-term commitments. He worked enough to pay rent, enough to keep food on the table, and Rex well cared for. Nights were harder. Sleep came in short stretches, often interrupted by memories he could not fully name but felt deeply. Metal sounds shouted warnings, the weight of responsibility when decisions came too late. There had been an event overseas, one that ended badly, despite every correct procedure being followed. Caleb had learned then that doing everything right did not guarantee the right outcome. The lesson stayed with him, shaping his silence, his distance, his refusal to anchor himself to anything fragile. Yet the idea of the land lingered, not because it promised opportunity, but because it promised nothing at all. No expectations, no neighbors watching for success or failure, just rock, cold air, and the chance to build or not on his own terms. A place already dismissed by others felt oddly honest. He packed carefully, tools he trusted, camping supplies chosen for durability, not comfort. A medical kit he maintained out of habit, restocked without thinking. Food enough for weeks, plus extra rations for Rex. As he loaded everything into his aging pickup and drove west, the landscape growing steeper and harsher with every mile. Now, standing on Clearwater Hollow's main street, Caleb took in the town without judgment. A gas station, a hardware store, a cafe not yet open, a school bus idling at the corner. The place felt tired, but not broken, just weathered. At the gas station, a middle-aged attendant with a gray mustache glanced at Caleb's plates, then at Rex. His eyes lingered on the dog, softening slightly. "Cold's coming down hard this year," the man said, voice rough from years of winter air. "You heading up into the hills?" Caleb nodded. "Got land up there." The man raised his eyebrows, not surprised so much as curious. "Cave country," he said. "Not much use to most folks." Caleb met his gaze evenly. "I'm not most folks." The attendant let out a brief, humorless laugh and returned to the pump. "Fair enough." At the hardware store, an older woman rang up rope, lantern fuel, and a heavy shovel. She didn't ask questions. Her eyes flicked briefly to Caleb's stance, the way he positioned himself near the door, then moved on. Experience told her all she needed to know. When Caleb left town, the road narrowed quickly. Pavement gave way to gravel, then to frozen dirt. Pines crowded in close, their branches crusted with frost. The sky lowered, turning the light flat and colorless. Cell service vanished without warning. At a bend where the road thinned to little more than a track, Caleb stopped the truck and shut off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. He stepped out, breath fogging the air, and Rex followed, standing alert at his side. Caleb looked ahead toward the rising terrain, the forest thickening where stone broke through the soil. He could turn back now. No one would know. No one expected anything of him. He reached into his coat and touched the folded deed in his pocket. "All right," he said quietly. Rex's ears lifted, his attention sharpening. Together they left the road and moved toward the high ground, into land already written off by others. The wind followed them, cold and unyielding, as the forest closed behind. The forest thinned as Caleb climbed, the ground changing underfoot from loam to gravel, then to a scatter of angular stones that rang softly when disturbed. The air grew colder with elevation, yet the wind eased, as if the ridgeline ahead absorbed its force. Rex moved a half step in front now, nose low, reading the ground with the practiced confidence of a dog who had learned that the earth tells stories if you listen closely. Caleb kept the rope coiled at his shoulder and the shovel slung across his back, adjusting his pace to the terrain, placing each foot with care. He did not hurry. He had learned long ago that speed made mistakes louder. The map's hand-drawn line proved accurate. A narrow ravine opened between slabs of granite, its sides rising steep and close enough to dull the light. At the far end, partially screened by wind-bent juniper and a tumble of fallen rock, the land gave way to a dark mouth in the stone. The cave entrance was wider than Caleb expected, broad enough that a truck might pass if there were a road to it. Two boulders leaned together at the left edge like shoulders locked in a private argument. Snow lay shallow near the opening, thinner than elsewhere, and the ground beneath showed no ice glaze. Caleb noticed this immediately. It was the sort of detail he had trained himself to notice, the small irregularities that explained larger truths. Rex halted, ears lifting, body still. He sniffed once, then again, drawing the air deep into his chest. His tail steadied, neither tucked nor wagging, a signal of interest rather than alarm. Caleb set down his pack and took out the lantern. He waited a beat, listening. The cave did not answer with the hollow drip and echo he expected. Instead, there was a subtle movement of air, almost like a breath passing the lips. He struck the lantern and stepped inside. The temperature changed within a few paces. The cold did not vanish, but it softened, losing its edge. Caleb felt it against his cheeks and hands, a gentle warmth that contradicted the season. The lantern's flame held steady, not guttering the way it did in drafts, and the air carried a faint mineral scent, clean and dry. The floor sloped gradually, packed earth mixed with fine sand firm underfoot. He swept the light in a slow arc. The ceiling rose higher than expected, vaulted and smooth, showing no signs of recent collapse. The walls were dry to the touch, no seepage, no slick of ice. This was not a damp hole in the ground. It was a space. Rex entered beside him, posture relaxed but attentive. The dog moved forward, paused, then turned back to look at Caleb, as if to confirm permission. Caleb nodded. Rex continued, nails clicking softly, sniffing the perimeter, checking corners. When he returned, he sat, calm and composed, and looked at Caleb again. The message was clear. No immediate danger. Caleb paced the chamber, counting steps, measuring with his eyes, the way he had been taught to do when tape and instruments were not available. Roughly 40 feet deep, perhaps 20 across at its widest. Enough room to work, enough room to shelter. At the back, a narrow fissure split the rock, too tight to enter, but from it came the source of the warmth. Caleb held his hand near the opening and felt it clearly, heat rising in steady waves, not hot enough to burn, but unmistakable. He closed his eyes for a moment and let the realization settle. The earth here did not merely block the cold, it produced its own answer to it. He set the pack down and took inventory with methodical calm. The canvas could serve as a windbreak. The shovel would help level the floor near the entrance. If he worked carefully, he could pitch a temporary shelter just inside the threshold, far enough back to benefit from the warmth but close enough to daylight. The idea did not feel reckless. It felt precise. By late afternoon, he had cleared a section of ground and erected the canvas at an angle that directed airflow upward rather than inward. Rex lay near the fissure, content, eyes half-lidded, chest rising and falling in a slow, even rhythm. Caleb ate standing, jerky and bread washed down with lukewarm coffee from the thermos. He felt the fatigue then, the honest kind that came from effort rather than vigilance. When darkness fell, it did so quietly. The lantern cast a steady circle of light. Outside, the wind found the rocks again and complained, but inside the cave, the air remained patient. Sleep came in fragments. Caleb woke once to a sound he could not place, a low, distant shift of stone that resolved into nothing. Rex did not stir. Caleb lay back and let his breathing slow, counting the rise and fall until his thoughts settled. When he slept again, it was deeper. Morning revealed frost feathered along the cave's outer edge, delicate and pale, while the interior remained unchanged. Caleb rose early and worked through the coldest hours, hauling fallen branches from the tree line and stacking them where they would dry. He marked the floor with a stick, sketching a simple plan, where a platform might go, where storage could be set, how light would travel as the sun climbed. It was not ambition that drove him, but order. Order was a language he understood. Near midday, Rex's behavior changed. The dog, who had been resting near the entrance, lifted his head sharply and stood, his ears angled forward, nostrils flaring. He moved a few steps toward the ravine, then stopped, head cocked, listening. A low sound escaped his throat, not a growl, not a bark, but a questioning note. Caleb straightened, attention narrowing. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Rex did not look back. He moved forward again, this time more decisively, and paused at a break in the rock where a narrow side passage disappeared into shadow. The air from that direction smelled different, sharp, organic, and he touched with something sour. Caleb caught it too and frowned. He retrieved the lantern and followed. The side passage was tighter, the ceiling lowering, the walls closing in. The warmth faded slightly but did not vanish. Rex advanced a few yards, then stopped abruptly and sat, staring ahead. Caleb raised the lantern. A figure lay on the ground. The woman was motionless, half on her side, one arm bent beneath her, the other extended awkwardly. She was perhaps in her late 30s or early 40s, slender, her frame slight beneath a heavy coat dusted with grit. Dark hair spilled loose from beneath a wool cap, tangled and damp with sweat despite the cold. Her skin was pale, with a grayish cast around the mouth. Caleb's eyes went immediately to her leg. Just above the boot, the fabric was torn, and beneath it the skin was swollen, bemottled with deepening bruises. 2 puncture marks stood out, angry and precise. Snakebite. Caleb knelt without hesitation, setting the lantern down to free his hands. He did not touch her yet. He checked her breathing first, shallow but present. He glanced at Rex, who had shifted closer and now lay beside the woman's legs, body angled protectively, eyes fixed on her face. "Good," Caleb murmured, more to the dog than to himself. He reached for his kit, already running through options, assessing time, temperature, and the limits of what he could do here. The situation was serious, but not yet beyond reach. He took a steadying breath and placed 2 fingers at the woman's neck, counting, listening, committing the rhythm to memory. She stirred then, just slightly, a faint sound catching in her throat. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. "Stay with me," Caleb said, voice low and even, the tone he used when panic made things worse. "You're not alone." Outside, the wind rose again, pressing cold against stone. Inside the cave, the rock breathed on, steady and indifferent, holding its warmth as Caleb prepared to act. Caleb worked with the economy of motion that came from long habit, not urgency. Panic wasted time, and time was the only currency that mattered now. He slid the lantern closer to the woman's face, angling the light so it would not blind her if she woke. Her breathing was shallow, but regular, a thin rasp that caught slightly at the back of her throat. He pressed 2 fingers again to her neck and counted, then checked the color of her lips and the temperature of her skin. Cold, but not dangerously so. The swelling in her lower leg was advancing, the skin tight and glossy around the puncture marks. He had seen this before, not here, not in a mountain cave. But the body's response was familiar enough to guide his hands. Rex remained where he was, flanked along the woman's legs, his head low, and his body still. The dog's age showed most clearly when he lay down. The stiffness in his hindquarters took a second to resolve, a small hitch before comfort returned. His eyes never left Caleb's hands. When Caleb reached for the medical kit, Rex shifted his weight just enough to make room without breaking contact, as if he understood the choreography. Caleb cut away the torn fabric above the wound with careful pressure, exposing skin mottled in bruised purples and reds. He did not try anything theatrical. There would be no cutting, no dramatic gestures. He cleaned the area, marked the edge of the swelling with a pen, and immobilized the leg as best he could with a splint, improvised from a short board and cloth torn from his spare shirt. He kept the limb at heart level, adjusting stones beneath it until the position held. Yet he spoke to the woman throughout, steady and quiet, describing what he was doing, not because she could hear him, he didn't know that she could, but because naming steps kept his own mind aligned. "You're going to feel cold," he said. "That's all right. Try not to move." She stirred again, a faint crease forming between her brows, and then her eyes opened. They were dark, unfocused at first, then searching. Her gaze caught on the lantern and flinched away, landing instead on Rex's face. The dog did not move. He simply breathed. "Easy," Caleb said. He raised one hand where she could see it. "You're safe. You were bitten, but you're still with me." Her mouth moved, shaping sound that did not quite arrive. He leaned closer. "My name's Caleb," he said. "What's yours?" A pause. Another shallow breath. "Mara," she whispered, when the word rough with pain. "Mara Ellison." Her voice carried a slight rasp, as if she had learned to speak more to the wind than to people. Caleb filed the name away and nodded once. "All right, Mara, I'm going to keep you warm. Don't try to stand." He slid the canvas closer, blocking the draft, and added another layer beneath her shoulders. He checked her pulse again, then her pupils. He made notes on the inside of his wrist with the pen, times, changes, the direction of the swelling, small anchors against uncertainty. When her eyes closed again, it was not the slack collapse of unconsciousness, but the controlled retreat of someone exhausted. Hours passed in increments. The cave's warmth remained constant, a quiet reassurance. Outside, the light thinned and shifted. Inside, the lantern kept its steady pool. Rex rose once to drink from the bowl Caleb set out, then returned to his place without being asked. When Caleb finally allowed himself to sit, it was close enough to Mara that he could reach her without standing. He kept one hand resting on his knee, the other near the kit. She woke again near dusk, more present this time. Her eyes found Caleb and held. "You're not from the Hollow," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Caleb replied, "just passing through." A corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "No one passes through here." She was right. He let that stand. Mara was lean, her build narrow but not fragile, the kind shaped by walking long distances with purpose. Her hair, now loosened from its cap, fell to her shoulders in dark waves threaded with early gray. Her skin bore the mark of someone who lived outdoors. Weathered but resilient, freckles scattered along her cheekbones and nose. When she spoke, there was a directness to her, a habit of stating things plainly, as if ornament had been stripped away by necessity. She told him, in brief fragments, how she had come to the cave. She lived alone on the lower slope, a cabin built from salvaged boards and stubbornness. Her husband had died 3 winters earlier in a quarry accident, and the quiet afterward had been heavier than grief. She hunted small game, traded herbs and repairs in town, kept to herself. That morning, she had followed a deer track too far, missed the signs of cold rock, and felt the strike before she saw the snake. "I tried to make it back," she said. "Got dizzy, then I didn't." "You did enough," Caleb said. He adjusted the splint, watching her face. She hissed once, then steadied. "You found shelter." She looked around, noticing the lantern, the canvas, the way the air moved without biting. "This place breathes," she said. Caleb nodded. "It does." Night deepened. The wind outside rose and fell, testing the stone. Inside, time became a series of checks and small tasks. Caleb prepared broth on the camp stove, coaxing Mara to sip when she could. He kept her warm, kept her still. The swelling slowed, then held. Her breathing eased. He did not allow himself relief. He allowed himself attention. Sometime after midnight, snow began to fall. He knew it by the sound, the way the wind changed pitch, muffled. Rex lifted his head once, then settled again. By morning, the cave entrance wore a pale fringe of white. Caleb stepped out long enough to confirm the weather and gather more wood, moving carefully so as not to leave the shelter unattended for long. When he returned, Mara was awake, watching Rex's tail sweep the ground. "He stayed," she said. "He will," Caleb replied. They spoke little that day. The work of healing required quiet. When she slept, Caleb planned. He measured the light, the airflow, the space where he could build something more permanent than canvas. He considered the distance to town, the risk of moving her too soon, the advantage of the cave's warmth. The conclusion formed without drama. She would need days, perhaps longer. The cave could give them those days. Late in the afternoon, Mara asked, "Why did you come up here?" Caleb considered the question. He did not offer the full ledger of reasons. "I needed a place that didn't expect anything," he said. She nodded, understanding without comment. As the day closed, Caleb added another layer to the shelter and secured the lantern. He checked Mara one last time, then sat back, allowing his shoulders to ease a fraction. Rex shifted closer to him, pressing his weight against Caleb's shin. The dog's presence was warm and solid, an anchor in the quiet. Outside, the snow continued. Inside, the cave held its breath and then released it again, steady and unhurried. Caleb watched the light fade and thought, not for the first time, that survival was not a single act but a series of measured choices. Tonight, the choice was simple. Stay. Watch. Wait. He stayed. The second night passed without crisis, and by morning the cave felt less like a temporary refuge, and more like a place that had quietly accepted them. Snow lay deeper outside, smoothing the ravine into pale contours, but the interior air held steady, neither warm nor cold enough to demand attention. Caleb woke early, as he always did, and took a long moment to listen. Mara's breathing was even. Rex slept with his head on his paws, eyes opening briefly when Caleb moved, then closing again. The cave's subtle draft traced a familiar path from the fissure toward the entrance, lifting the canvas edge and letting it fall. Nothing had changed, which, for now, was everything. Caleb checked the swelling first. The bruising had darkened but stopped spreading. He marked the edge again, noting the time. When he finished, Mara opened her eyes and watched him work without speaking. "You're steady," she said after a moment. "Most people rush when they're scared." "I don't rush," Caleb replied. "I plan." She considered that, then nodded. "That tracks." Her color had improved slightly, the gray receding from her lips. When she spoke, her voice was stronger, though fatigue still clung to it. Caleb helped her sit up, bracing her back with rolled canvas and adjusting the splint. She winced once and then settled, jaw tightening until the pain passed. He handed her broth and waited while she drank. Rex rose and repositioned himself so that his flank touched her shoulder, a solid line of warmth and reassurance. The day unfolded in practical increments. Caleb expanded the shelter, reinforcing the canvas with a frame of saplings cut and notched to lock together without nails. He worked close to the entrance, keeping the structure angled to guide airflow upward. Each movement was deliberate, measured. The soldier in him favored systems that could be checked and improved. The man he was becoming favored systems that could endure. Mara watched from her place, offering quiet observations that proved useful. She knew the mountain's habits, the way storms gathered, the animals that moved through the ravine, the hours when the wind changed direction. She did not talk about herself unless asked, but when she did, she was precise. "My cabin's lower down," she said as Caleb tightened a lash. "Built it after the quarry shut. Not pretty, but it stands. I haul water from the spring and trade repairs in town. Folks leave me alone." "Is that what you want?" Caleb asked. She shrugged. "It's what works." By midday, the light shifted enough that a pale beam reached the cave floor. Caleb noted it, then marked the spot with a stone. He imagined where a platform could go, where supplies might stack, how to keep dry space separate from damp. He imagined, too, the effort required to move Mara safely once she was ready. The calculation was not simple. He weighed distance, snow depth, and the advantage of remaining near the heat source. Each option carried cost. A sound interrupted his thinking, a low snort from beyond the entrance. Rex was on his feet in an instant, ears forward, body angled toward the sound. Caleb reached for the lantern and moved closer to the opening, careful not to cast himself as a silhouette. The sound came again, followed by the soft clink of metal. "Easy," a voice called from outside. "Easy now." A mule stepped into view, gray with darker stockings, its breath steaming in the cold. Behind it came a man in his late 50s, lean and weathered, with a beard gone mostly white and eyes narrowed against the glare. He wore a heavy coat patched at the elbows and a hat pulled low. His posture was guarded but not aggressive, the stance of someone who had learned that caution saved energy. He stopped when he saw Caleb, then noticed Rex and froze. His gaze flicked to the dog's scar, the harness handle. Recognition crossed his face. "Didn't mean to intrude," the man said. His voice was rough but steady. "Saw the smoke earlier, thought I'd check." Caleb held his position. "Who are you?" "Name's Tom Calder," the man said. "I haul supplies when the roads get mean. The mule's Annie. She's older than she looks." He patted the animal's neck. Annie flicked an ear and shifted her weight, patient, eyes dull but calm. Caleb assessed him quickly. Tom was spare but strong, the kind of strength earned by repetition rather than pride. His beard was trimmed close, his hands scarred and capable. There was a faint stiffness in his left knee when he stepped, the legacy of some injury he did not advertise. "There's someone hurt," Caleb said. "She can't move yet." Tom's eyes softened. "Snake?" Caleb nodded. Tom exhaled slowly. "Happens. Cold drives them into bad places." He glanced around, taking in the cave, the shelter, the measured order. "You picked a good hole," Mara spoke from behind them. "He did." Tom turned, surprise flickering, then concern. He tipped his hat. "Didn't know anyone was back here." "Most don't," she said. Tom hesitated, then made a decision. "I've got bandage rolls and anti-venom in the pack," he said. "Not much, but better than nothing. Was heading to the upper cabins anyway." Caleb weighed the offer. Trust was not a currency he spent freely, but circumstances were clear. "Bring it in," he said, slow. Tom nodded and led Annie forward. Rex watched, muscles taut but controlled. When the mule stopped, Rex sniffed once and stepped back. Annie lowered her head and stood. Tom worked efficiently, laying out supplies without comment. He checked Mara's leg with practiced care, nodding at Caleb's work. "You did right," he said. "I've seen worse done by people who thought they knew better." Mara accepted the anti-venom with a grimace and steadied herself. The relief was not immediate, but it was real. When it was done, Tom packed up, eyes moving between Caleb and the cave. "You staying?" he asked. "For now," Caleb said. Tom nodded. "Storm will break in a day or two. I'll pass word in town that you're up here. Might save you some trouble." "I don't want attention," Caleb said. Tom's mouth twitched. No one does. Still gets it. He left as he came, mule steady behind him, the sound of hooves fading into snow. Rex watched until the ravine swallowed them, then returned to Mara's side. The afternoon settled. Caleb adjusted the shelter again, making room for a more permanent bed. He began leveling a section of floor, tamping earth until it held. He worked until his arms ached, and then a little more. The labor steadied him. When he paused, he noticed something unfamiliar, a sense of direction that did not rely on leaving. Mara slept through the worst of the pain and woke near dusk, clearer than before. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. "I did," Caleb replied. "Once I found this place." She studied him, seeing perhaps what others missed, the careful way he carried responsibility, the absence of hurry. "Then you're like me," she said. "You build where you land." Outside, the wind eased. The cave kept its patient breath. Caleb sat back on his heels and looked at what he had begun. Not much, but enough to continue. The decision formed without fanfare. He would not move her yet. He would not rush the work. The cave had offered time, and time, he knew, was the rarest thing a person could be given. He fed Rex and ate himself, then checked Mara one last time. The lantern dimmed. Snow whispered against stone. Caleb leaned back against the wall, feeling the steady warmth at his spine, and allowed the thought to settle fully for the first time. He was staying. Morning arrived without ceremony. The cave did not brighten the way open land did. Instead, light slid inward in a narrow band, touching stone, canvas, and the leveled earth Caleb had tamped flat the night before. Snow still lay heavy outside, but the air inside remained steady, carrying that same mineral warmth that had already proven itself reliable. Caleb woke with stiffness in his shoulders and a clarity in his mind that had been rare for years. The decision to stay, once made, removed a certain noise from his thoughts. There was work to be done. He preferred that kind of quiet. Mara was awake when he checked on her, sitting more upright now, back supported by the canvas wall. Her face still showed fatigue, but her eyes were clear, alert. Color had returned to her cheeks, muted, but real. The swelling in her leg had eased further. The skin less taut, the bruising settling into darker tones that suggested the worst of the spread had passed. "You slept," Caleb said. "I listened," she replied. "Different thing." He nodded, accepting the distinction. He replaced the bandage with careful hands, his touch firm but considerate. Mara watched him, noting the precision, the absence of wasted movement. "You're used to bodies breaking," she said quietly. It wasn't accusation, it was observation. "Yes," Caleb answered. He did not elaborate. He had learned which truths were meant to remain functional rather than spoken. Rex lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes tracking both of them. The dog had aged into a kind of gravity. His movements were slower now, more deliberate, but his awareness had sharpened rather than dulled. When Caleb stood, Rex rose with him, stretching his hind legs carefully before settling again beside Mara, close enough that his flank brushed her arm. She rested her fingers briefly in the thick fur at his neck, grounding herself in the warmth and weight of a living thing that asked nothing of her. By mid-morning, Caleb began the next phase of work. Shelter alone was not enough. If they were staying, and he no longer questioned that, they would need systems, dry space, storage, heat retention. He started with the floor, digging shallow channels along the edges of the leveled area to direct any moisture away from where people would sleep. The earth here cooperated, compact and responsive, holding shape once pressed. He hauled in more saplings and cut them to length, fitting them together into a low platform that lifted bedding off the ground. By each joint locked by notch and pressure, no nails required. The structure felt honest under his weight. Mara followed his progress with interest. When he paused to rest, she spoke. "The ground near the south wall stays drier," she said. "I noticed it when I came in yesterday. Water runs away from that side." Caleb considered, then nodded. "Good eye." "I've had to notice things," she said. "When you live alone, the land doesn't forgive ignorance." Her voice held no bitterness, only fact. Caleb found he respected that. As the day wore on, the cave began to change character. Not dramatically, but in ways that mattered. Order replaced improvisation, tools gained places, the lantern hung from a hook rather than sitting on the ground. Wood stacked neatly, sorted by thickness. Caleb marked another section of floor with stones. Was imagining raised beds there, not yet built, but possible. The thought surprised him. He had not come here to farm. And yet the idea took hold, rooted in the simple reality of warmth and time. Mara noticed his gaze lingering on the marked stones. "You could grow things," she said. "In a cave?" Caleb asked. She shrugged slightly, mindful of her leg. "I've seen moss thrive where it shouldn't. I've seen greens grow under snow with the right cover. This place cheats winter." The phrase stayed with him. Cheats winter. He liked that. In the early afternoon, Rex stiffened suddenly, lifting his head. This time the alert was different from before, less urgent, more curious. A sound followed, the crunch of snow, uneven, cautious. Caleb moved toward the entrance, hand resting lightly on the shovel handle. A horse emerged into view. Chestnut with a broad white blaze down its face, steam rolling from its nostrils. It was followed by a young woman leading it by the reins. She was perhaps in her late 20s, tall and strong through the shoulders, her posture confident despite the snow. Her dark hair was braided tight beneath a hood, her face weather-browned and sharp-featured, with a narrow scar cutting through one eyebrow. She wore a heavy coat cinched at the waist and moved with the easy balance of someone accustomed to uneven ground. She stopped when she saw Caleb and Rex, eyes flicking first to the dog, then to Caleb's stance. Her grip on the reins tightened slightly, but she did not retreat. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said. Her voice was clear, steady. "Tom Calder told me someone was holed up in the caves. Said there was a woman hurt." Caleb held her gaze. "She's alive," the woman exhaled, tension easing. "Good. I'm Lila Moreno. I keep the North Ridge. Tom asked me to bring supplies in case you needed them." She glanced past him, catching sight of Mara. Her expression softened. "Looks like you did." Caleb stepped aside, allowing her to approach slowly. Rex remained still, watchful but calm. The horse, older by the gray at its muzzle, stamped once and lowered its head, patient. Lila tied the horse outside and entered the cave, taking in the space with quick, assessing eyes. "You picked a smart place," she said. "My grandfather used to say these caves were alive, said they breathed." "They do," Mara replied. "That's why I didn't freeze." Lila knelt briefly to check Mara's leg, her movements practiced. "I'm no medic," she said. "Tch, but I know what bad looks like. This isn't that." Relief passed across Mara's face, subtle but real. Lila unloaded her pack, dried food, clean cloth, a small coil of wire, seeds wrapped in oilskin. "Didn't know what you'd need," she said, "so I brought what I could carry." Caleb studied the seeds. "Why those?" Lila's mouth twitched. "Because people always forget to bring them." She stayed only a short while, long enough to share information. The storm would break soon, but another cold front would follow. The town was uneasy, supplies tight. She glanced at Caleb when she said this, measuring him. "You planning on staying long?" she asked. Caleb looked around the cave, the structure taking shape, the woman healing, the dog settled at his feet. "Long enough to finish what I start," he said. Lila nodded. "Pya, then you'll fit in better than you think." She left before dusk, her horse's hooves fading into the snow. The cave felt quieter after, but not emptier. Caleb packed away the supplies, noting what they added to his mental inventory. Mara slept through the worst of the afternoon pain and woke hungry, a good sign. He fed her slowly, watching her color, her focus. As evening settled, Caleb took the shovel and dug deeper along the marked section of floor, testing the soil. It was workable, rich enough once amended. The idea of planting no longer felt abstract. It felt like a next step. Mara watched him from the platform. "You're not just staying," she said. "You're building." Caleb paused, leaning on the shovel handle. "I don't know how to do anything else." She smiled then, small but genuine. "Neither do I." Night came gently. The lantern glowed. Rex sighed and curled closer to the warmth. Caleb sat against the stone wall, exhaustion settling into his bones, but it was a clean exhaustion, earned and useful. Outside, winter pressed in, indifferent and relentless. Inside, the cave held. He looked at what they had, space, heat, time, and the beginnings of intention, and understood something he had not allowed himself to name before. This was no longer survival. This was the start of a life shaped deliberately, from the ground up. The storm broke sometime before dawn, not with drama, but with a quiet loosening of the air. Snow still clung to the ravine walls, yet the wind had lost its edge, and the cave's steady warmth felt more pronounced by contrast. Caleb rose early and stepped outside, boots crunching into the crusted surface. The sky had lifted to a pale blue, the kind that followed hard weather, and the light sharpened every ridge and tree. He stood for a moment, breathing in, then turned back inside with purpose settling into his shoulders like a familiar weight. Mara was awake, sitting at the edge of the platform. She tested her injured leg with careful movements, placing her foot down and shifting a fraction of weight onto it. Her face tightened, then relaxed as she found the limit and respected it. She looked up at Caleb and gave a small nod. "I'm better," she said. "Not ready, but better." "That's enough for today," he replied. He handed her a walking stick he'd cut and smoothed the night before, the handle shaped to fit her palm. She took it, fingers closing with quiet appreciation. Rex followed them as Caleb began the next task. He had chosen a section along the south wall where the floor stayed dry and the warmth pooled naturally. With a shovel and a short mattock, he dug a rectangle into the packed earth, deep enough to hold amended soil. The work was slow, but the ground cooperated. Each cut produced a dull, honest sound, not the hollow echo of rot. When he finished the first bed, he lined it with flat stones scavenged from the ravine, stacking them carefully so they locked without mortar. The structure held. Mara watched from a few steps back, leaning on her stick. "You're building it like a fortification," she observed. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. "If it holds, it lasts." She smiled faintly. "Fair." They worked in intervals. Caleb hauled soil from a nearby slope where the snow had melted fastest, dark loam mixed with leaf mold. He blended it with pine duff and a handful of ash from the fire, breaking clumps with his hands until the texture felt right. He filled the bed slowly, tamping as he went. When he stepped back, the rectangle looked deliberate, grounded. He placed stones at the corners, marking it not as a test but as a beginning. Near midday, Rex's ears lifted again, but this time the sound carried familiarity. A single whistle, low and controlled. Caleb straightened, eyes narrowing toward the entrance. Lila returned, leading her chestnut horse with easy confidence. Yes, the animal's age showed in the gray along its muzzle and the careful way it placed its hooves, but its eye was bright, its movements patient. Lila dismounted smoothly and tied the reins to a rock outcrop. "You weren't kidding about staying," she said, scanning the cave interior. "Looks like you're setting down roots." "Testing them," Caleb replied. Lila stepped closer to the raised bed and crouched, pressing her fingers into the soil. "You'll get greens here," she said. "Maybe roots if you're patient." She stood and shrugged off her pack. "I brought a few more things. Figured you'd need them." She laid out the contents, a coil of thin copper wire, a small hand auger, and a cloth-wrapped bundle of seedlings, their roots damp and protected. "These won't mind the light," she said. "Hardy stock." Mara leaned forward, her interest brightening her eyes. "You didn't have to." Lila shrugged again. "People don't usually do things they have to. They do what makes sense." As if on cue, another sound reached them. Slow, deliberate footfalls accompanied by the jingle of tack. A second horse appeared at the edge of the ravine, this one a tall bay with a white sock on its left hind leg. The rider dismounted carefully and led the horse forward. He was a broad man in his early 40s, his beard thick and dark, threaded with copper, his hair pulled back at the nape. His face was square, features set with a habitual seriousness that softened when he removed his gloves. "Name's Eli Hargreaves," he said, voice low and measured. "Lila said you might need lumber moved." He carried himself like someone who had learned to measure his strength after losing it once. A faint limp marked his step, subtle but persistent. When he spoke, he watched people's hands, not their faces. Caleb nodded. "I could use help." Eli surveyed the cave with a carpenter's eye, noting angles, spans, the way air moved. "You've got good stone," he said, "and better sense than most." They set to work without ceremony. Eli and Lila hauled thicker timbers from the tree line, using the horses to drag them across packed snow. Caleb directed placement, his voice calm, precise. Together they raised a low frame along the wall opposite the sleeping platform, a structure that would hold shelves and tools. Eli cut joints cleanly, his hands steady, his motions economical. When he paused, he rubbed his knee absently, the old injury reminding him of limits learned too late. "I fell from a roof," Eli said when Mara asked. "Long time ago. Learned to build closer to the ground." The work continued into afternoon. The cave felt transformed, not crowded, but purposeful. Lila rigged a simple reflective panel with the copper wire, angling it to catch the narrow band of daylight and throw it deeper into the space. The effect was subtle but real, the raised bed brightening enough to show promise. Caleb planted the first seedlings with care, spacing them generously, covering roots and firming soil around them. When he finished, he watered lightly, watching how the earth drank. Mara took a few steps on her own, testing balance, then stopped before the bed. She reached down and pressed her fingers into the soil, closing her eyes briefly. "This will work," she said. It wasn't optimism, it was recognition. By the time Eli and Lila prepared to leave, the sun had dropped behind the ridge. They stood near the entrance, breath fogging in the cooling air. "We'll check back," Lila said. "Town's talking, not all of it bad." Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. Rex watched them go, tail lifting once before settling. That night the cave held more than warmth. It held intention. Caleb sat with his back to the stone, listening to the quiet sounds of settling earth and sleeping breath. The seedlings rested beneath a thin cover of straw, the soil dark and expectant. He understood then that what he was building wasn't defiance of winter, but an agreement with it. Work done where conditions allowed, patience where they did not. He checked Mara one last time, then lay down, Rex curling close. Outside, the cold returned in waves, testing the mountain. Inside, the cave answered with its steady breath. Caleb closed his eyes, not to escape the day, but to mark it. Roots, he thought, didn't need light to begin. Winter returned in layers rather than force, testing the cave the way a cautious opponent tested a defense, probing, waiting, adjusting. The temperature outside dipped again, not enough to seal the ravine shut, but enough to remind everyone that the season was far from finished. Inside, the cave responded with its steady, indifferent warmth. Caleb had stopped marveling at it. He trusted it now, the way he trusted stone that had already proven it could bear weight. The seedlings were the first to show change. Not dramatic growth, not yet, but signs that mattered, stems that did not wilt, leaves that held their color, soil that stayed dark and workable instead of stiffening into cold refusal. Caleb checked them every morning, not with the impatience of someone waiting for proof, but with the careful attention of someone measuring progress honestly. He adjusted the reflective panel by inches, noting how light shifted across the bed. When he watered, he did it sparingly, letting the earth decide how much it would accept. Mara moved more freely now. The stick remained in her hand, but she used it for balance rather than necessity. Her stride was cautious, uneven at times, but no longer fragile. Color had returned fully to her face, and the tension she once carried in her shoulders had eased. She took on small tasks without being asked, sorting dried food, organizing supplies, keeping the space clean and deliberate. It was not gratitude that drove her, but a quiet insistence on contributing. She had never been comfortable being carried by circumstance. Rex aged visibly during this stretch of days, not in decline but in temperament. He slept more, choosing warm places near the fissure, rising slowly when needed. Yet his vigilance remained intact. He continued his patrols at dawn and dusk, nose working the air, ears lifting at distant sounds. His coat had thickened for winter, the sable darkening along his back. When strangers approached the ravine, Rex was always the first to know. It was Rex who signaled the next change. The sound reached them late one afternoon, voices, strained and unfamiliar, carrying the cadence of urgency rather than curiosity. Rex stood abruptly, body angled toward the entrance, a low warning in his chest. Caleb moved to him, resting a hand lightly on the dog's shoulder. Two figures appeared at the edge of the ravine, half hidden by snow and rock. They were men, both in their 30s, bundled in mismatched coats. One was tall and gaunt, his beard untrimmed, his eyes restless. The other was broader, with a thick neck and a scar pulling one side of his mouth downward. They stopped when they saw Caleb, surprise flashing across their faces before calculation replaced it. "Didn't know anyone lived up here," the taller one said. His voice was thin, brittle with cold. We don't, Caleb replied. We're staying. The broader man shifted his weight, boots scraping. Town said there was food, he said. Said you were growing things. Mara stepped forward then, visible behind Caleb. She did not speak, but her presence changed the exchange. The men's eyes flicked to her, then to the raised bed, the stacked supplies. Want sharpened their focus. Winter's tight, the tall one said. People are running low. Caleb held their gaze without aggression. So are we. The broader man's jaw tightened. He took a step closer and Rex growled, low, controlled, final. The sound stopped the man where he stood. He raised his hand slightly, palms out. We're not here to take, he said, though the words came late. We were sent to ask. Caleb considered them. He noted the way the tall man avoided eye contact, the way the other watched Rex more than Caleb. He saw fear there, yes, but also resentment, the dangerous mix that came when pride had already been stripped thin. There's nothing to take yet, Caleb said, and nothing to spare. Mara spoke then, her voice steady. If you need help, ask for it straight. Don't come like this. The men exchanged a glance. The taller one swallowed. We didn't know how else, Caleb nodded once. Now you do. They left without further argument, their retreat awkward, shoulders hunched. Rex watched until they vanished, then sat, the tension draining from him. Caleb exhaled slowly. He knew that encounter would not be the last. When resources grew scarce, reason often followed. That night Caleb made a decision he had been circling for days. He told Mara as they ate. If we're going to stay, he said, we need protein we can control. She understood immediately. Animals. Yes. The next morning, Lila returned, this time with more intent than supplies. She listened as Caleb explained his plan, nodding slowly. There's a widow down valley, she said. Keeps a few sheep, older woman. Lost her husband last spring. She might trade. They set out together, on choosing a clear window of weather. Caleb left Rex to guard the cave with Mara, trusting the dog's instincts and Mara's growing strength. The walk down was slow but manageable. They found the woman's place, a low structure built into the slope, smoke curling thinly from its chimney. Her name was Eleanor Pike. She was in her early 60s, small but compact, her back straight despite the years. Her hair was iron gray, braided tight, her face lined but sharp-eyed. She greeted them with caution that softened into curiosity. "You're the cave people," she said. It was not accusation, it was assessment, Caleb explained simply. Eleanor listened without interruption. When he finished, she nodded once. "I've got 3 ewes," she said. "Good fleece, calm. I can part with 1. The trade was fair. Eleanor accepted supplies and labor in exchange. You're insisting on showing Caleb how to handle the animal properly. The ewe was young, wool thick and clean, eyes bright. She walked steadily, unbothered by the lead rope. When they returned, Rex met them at the ravine, tail lifting in restrained approval. Mara watched from the entrance, her expression unreadable until she smiled, slow and real. The pen came together that afternoon, built from split rails and stone, positioned where warmth pooled, but air remained fresh. Caleb worked with care, ensuring space and cleanliness. The ewe settled without panic, sniffing the ground, then lowering herself into the straw. Life adjusted around her presence, feeding schedules formed, waste was managed. Mara took to the routine naturally, her hands gentle, her movements confident. The cave began to sound different, softer, more alive. As evening fell, Caleb sat near the raised bed, watching the seedlings push fractionally higher. The ewe shifted inside. Rex lay at his feet, eyes half closed. Mara joined him. "You know this will change things," she said. "I know," Caleb replied. She studied him. "You're ready for that." He considered the truth of it. The soldier in him had learned to endure. The man he was becoming was learning to invest. Outside, winter pressed on. Inside, something held. He watched the cave breathe and understood that survival was no longer the goal. Stability was. And stability, once earned, carried responsibility. Whether he wanted it or not, he accepted it. Spring did not arrive all at once. It came in signs small enough to miss if a person did not know where to look. The way snow pulled back from stone in uneven patches, the loosened smell of earth beneath ice, the longer stretch of light that reached deeper into the cave each afternoon. Caleb noticed everything. He had learned, over years of watching terrain for threats, to read subtle changes. Now those same instincts told him something different. The season was turning, and the cave, steady and patient, was ready to turn with it. The ewe settled into a rhythm that surprised even Caleb. She adapted quickly to the pen, grazing on dried feed and the occasional greens trimmed carefully from the raised bed. Her fleece thickened, clean and warm, and her presence altered the cave's atmosphere in ways that could not be measured. There was sound now, a soft rustle, a low breath, a reminder that life had weight and warmth of its own. Rex accepted her without issue, sniffing once and then ignoring her entirely, the way working dogs did once a thing proved it belonged. Mara took responsibility for the animal with a natural confidence. Her leg still ached on cold mornings, but the pain no longer ruled her movement. She rose earlier each day, testing her strength, reclaiming balance. Her hands, once idle with injury, now moved with purpose, cleaning the pen, measuring feed, checking water. The solitude she had carried for years had not made her fragile. It had made her capable. Caleb expanded the beds along the south wall, building 2 more frames from split timber and stone. He worked methodically, spacing them for access, angling them toward the light. He planted additional seedlings, then seeds Lila had brought, greens, roots, herbs chosen for resilience rather than yield. When the first true shoots appeared, pushing pale green through dark soil, he allowed himself a moment to simply watch. Not hope, confirmation. Word traveled, as it always did. People began to appear at the ravine with more care than before. Some came with questions, others with offers. Caleb kept the boundary clear. No one entered without invitation, no one stayed without purpose. It was not distrust that guided him, but clarity. He knew how easily good intentions blurred under pressure. One afternoon, Tom Calder returned with Annie the mule, hauling sacks of grain and a crate of jars. He dismounted with his usual stiffness and studied the cave with a low whistle. "You've been busy," he said. Caleb nodded. "So have you." Tom scratched his beard, eyes lingering on the raised beds, the pen, the ordered space. "Town's rougher than it lets on," he said. "People are burning through what they have." Mara stepped forward, leaning lightly on her stick. "We can spare a little," she said, voice calm. "Not charity, trade." Tom looked between them, understanding settling in. "I'll tell them." They began small, a basket of greens traded for salt, a jar of rendered fat exchanged for coffee. The ewe's wool, once shorn carefully and washed, became a quiet currency. Caleb insisted on fairness. He had seen what imbalance did to people. As weeks passed, the cave changed again. The beds flourished, leaves broadening, stems strengthening. The ewe grew heavy, her movements slower, her sides rounding. Mara noticed first, the hand resting gently against the animal's flank. "She's with Lamb," she said. Caleb nodded, already adjusting plans in his mind. Space, clean bedding, quiet. The lambs arrived on a night when rain fell steadily outside, loosening the last of winter's hold. Mara sat with the ewe, calm and focused, while Caleb held the lantern and Rex watched, alert but still. The first lamb emerged, slick and trembling, then the second, smaller but strong. Mara's hands were steady, her voice low, soothing. When it was done, the cave seemed to exhale. Life, once started, did not wait. Spring pushed forward. Snow vanished from the lower slopes. The creek ran full and clear. Lila returned with news that the pass would soon open. Eli came by to help extend the storage frame, his limp less pronounced in warmer weather. Eleanor Pike visited once, bringing advice and quiet approval. She touched the lamb's ears and nodded. "You did right by her," she said. Caleb felt the weight of responsibility settle more fully then, not as burden, but as shape. The cave had given them shelter. They had given it intention. Together, they had made something that did not rely on luck alone. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and painted the stone gold, Caleb and Mara sat near the entrance. Rex lay between them, muzzle silvering further with age, eyes half closed. The lambs shifted softly in their pen. The beds glowed with healthy green. "You ever think about leaving?" Mara asked. Caleb considered the question carefully. He thought of roads, of rented rooms, of nights spent listening for things that were no longer there. He thought of the quiet here, the honest labor. or the way his sleep had deepened without force. "No," he said. "I think about staying well." She smiled, small and unguarded. "Me too." When the first visitors from town arrived openly, families this time, cautious but hopeful, Caleb did not turn them away. He showed them the beds, explained the airflow, the stone, the patience required. He did not boast, he did not preach, he shared seeds and advice, nothing more. By late spring, the cave no longer felt hidden. It felt known, in the way solid things were known, without spectacle. People stopped calling it foolish. They called it smart. Some called it brave. Caleb did not correct them. Names mattered less than outcomes. On a clear morning in May, Caleb stood alone for a moment at the edge of the ravine. Below, Clearwater Hollow stirred, smoke rising in steady lines. Above, the high country stretched wide and unclaimed. Rex joined him, leaning into his leg. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's head, feeling the warmth there, familiar and earned. He thought of the man he had been when he first stepped off the road, careful, closed, unanchored. He thought of the choices that had brought him here, each one measured, each one deliberate. He had not escaped his past. He had integrated it, turned vigilance into stewardship, endurance into structure. Behind him, Mara's voice called his name, steady and present. He turned back toward the cave, toward warmth that did not fade with season, toward work that mattered. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. Some miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. They arrive quietly, through a helping hand, a brave heart, a choice to care when it would be easier to walk away. This is often how God works in our lives, not loudly, but faithfully, through ordinary people who choose compassion in difficult moments. In our everyday lives, we all face our own winters, seasons of loss, fear, or loneliness that feel endless. But as this story reminds us, when we act with love, when we refuse to abandon one another, God's grace continues to move, step by step, day by day, even when we don't immediately see it. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, so we can remember each other in prayer. And if you believe that no person or animal should ever face fear alone, subscribe to this channel and help us spread stories of healing, courage, and second chances. May God bless you and your family, protect you in times of uncertainty, and fill your life with peace, strength, and quiet miracles. Thank you for watching, and may His light guide you always.